Hey everybody, welcome back to the Wastewater Operations channel. As you can see, I'm not at my old plant. I've taken a different job and I'm at a new plant. Needless to say, with that transition and all that's happened with COVID-19, 2020 hasn't gone exactly like I suspected. But I'd like to get a video out now. I'll give you a quick look around the new facility. Then I want to go over how we decided to take a tank offline for summertime flows. And maybe give you a tool called the state point, which can help in your analysis of where your process is at. State point spreadsheet. We'll first open it up. It's going to land on this first tab. There's tabs here that explain some background on how Eric Wahlberg developed this spreadsheet, what the settling velocities were to establish a flux, and how you can do that on your own if you were to know what your own settling velocities were. The other options are just for the options of a settleometer. If you use a 2-liter settleometer without stirring, you use the SVI-SN. There's SVI-GN. There's single liter settleometer, and then stirred, not stirred. I find the SVI-SN is the most typical. We do a 2-liter settleometer, and we don't stir that settleometer. So the first thing we want to do when we get here is establish our units. Usually, if you're in the States, your clarifiers are rated in pounds per square foot per day. If that's the case, you'll populate a 1 in that pounds per square foot per day, and zeros in the kilograms per square meter per hour or day. But if you were outside the US and you wanted the metric loading rates, you could plot those also. You would just include the 1 and 0 out those pound-feet per day. Once you have your units established, we can start putting in some data. So I've got today's data for our plant. Our SVI came back at a 180. That SVI number has now plotted a curve on the graph, and that curve depicts our settling velocity. So a few more things we need to know is how many clarifiers are online. That's going to be 4. What's the surface area of each clarifier? Our surface area for our clarifiers here is 8655 square feet. If we remember our geometry, our square footage is just pi times the radius squared. We'll need to know our mixed liquor. Mixed liquor concentration today was about 3,000 milligrams per liter. These units are not in milligrams per liter, they're in grams per liter. So 3,000 milligrams per liter is 3 grams per liter. If I had a 2800 mixed liquor, I'd have a 2.8. So you can kind of see how that's going to play. My influent flow is influent flow to the reactor. So it could be your influent flow to your plant or your primary effluent flow. The idea is we want that influent flow to the reactor, not necessarily the mixed liquor flow to the clarifier. We'll say our influent flow for this morning when we took our numbers was 16.8, and we want our RAS flow. Typically we'll know RAS flows in percentage, but it wants to know your RAS flow in MGD, so that'll be the same moment that you took all the rest of your reads. And here at 60% return rate is a 9.9 on MGD. So what that plots for us is both overflow line and underflow line on the chart. Now the overflow line is meaningful, but largely we don't care about out here because most loadings are only going to help to establish where this point exists in the graph. So on the concentration line, our point is right above the 3,000, which is here, and the underflow line shows our loading factor to the clarifiers as well as the predicted RAS concentration. Now this predicted RAS concentration is generally fairly accurate. It's based on math. As long as we're not outside of this curve, it should be pretty accurate. If you put your data into this thing and you've got a different RAS concentration than what it's predicting, I would check all of your numbers. Something's likely off. There could be an unaccounted for data point or something similar. Nevertheless, the loading rate here is about 19 or 20 pounds per square foot per day. That's very typical. That's a good average loading rate for most clarifiers. I would say low is getting to the 15 and 10 pounds per square foot per day, and high would be maybe 25 on the peak. If you were pushing 30, that's a pretty amazing clarifier if you're able to maintain that kind of loading rate. I don't know what those are in metrics because, like I said, here in the States, I don't think about things that way, and I'd have to wrap my brain around what that would look like. The usefulness of this state point is really in playing around. If I wanted to reduce that return rate, I think 60% is too much. I can decide what I think I might want to do and enter those values and see what it might look like. So if I reduce my return rate down to 5.5 million gallons per day, now I'm pushing closer to 30%, 35% on my return rate. It's about half of what we're doing today, and it probably still functions okay. My state point is still inside the settleable solids flux curve, but the problem here is that the extension of this underflow line out into this time duration of that curve indicates a thickening failure on the system. So odds are I'm predicting a 12,000 milligram per liter RAS concentration. I'm just not going to get that 12,000. It's not possible. I will say the state point tends to over predict RAS. So if like this actually shows a failure, and in all odds I could probably take the plant down to 35. I don't know that this would be as accurate at that point. The state point is limited by not knowing exactly what's in the clarifier. So there's some limitation there, but like I said, for sanity's sake, I know that this is outside the bounds of what might be normal. Although I have, for that reduction, I have reduced my loading to the clarifiers. So if I had an overloading issue at a given flow rate, reducing the return rate will reduce the loading to those clarifiers. Next, let's say I was doing that 60% and I wanted to return more. Well, let's say I wanted to return 100%. That would be 16 million on influent and 16 million on RAS. All I would need to know is what the numbers are. I put them in and I get shown a 25 pounds per square foot per day loading rate. Now that's pushing really high for that flow. The other thing is it drops my RAS concentration down to 6,000 milligrams per liter, which if you could do 8,000 and you're doing 6,000, you're losing efficiency. You're also going to have trouble wasting those gallons. If you're wasting off that RAS concentration, it's not really working efficiently. The real goal here is to take up as much of this space between that settleable flux curve and the underflow line as possible. So today at 9.9 or 60, we're doing okay. There's still a little bit of space that could be occupied here, and maybe we could lower that return rate by 1 million gallons. That would only give us 500 milligrams, probably better on our RAS, but it might be worth that. So it's something to look into. This really gives you the ability to play around quite a bit. If I was imagining what a peak flow might look like at the end of the day, and I knew that peak flow was 25 million gallons, I would need to enter my 25 million gallons. 60% of that is, so let's call it roughly 18. I would know that I'm still fairly okay. I am seeing a reduction in RAS concentration. I'm getting down into that 7,000. That's not quite 60. That's more than 60%. But I'm still showing that there is some space here between that flux curve and my underflow line. So I might be all right. When this happens, odds are that mixed liquor is going to fall down anyway. Some of those solids are going to be maintained in the secondary clarifier because of this peak loading rate. And what will happen is my mixed liquor will go down. So if my mixed liquor was to go down to, say, 2,500 in the course of the day, it stands to reason that I've opened up this gap farther. I've also realistically reduced that RAS concentration. So this is the state point spreadsheet. If you happen to have flows that are measured in gallons per minute, this is a little cheat, a little gallons per minute calculator that you can put your gallons per minute in, and it will give you what that is in MGD. This calculator wants MGD for those numbers. But I would really encourage you, if you get your hands on this thing, play with it, try different iterations of different things. It's really useful tool in how to wrap your head around some of the interrelated natures of these process parameters and changes that we make. It's also just a fun and interesting tool to think about when we think about taking tanks off or putting tanks on or changing concentrations. It's really all, if you notice, the kind of the background of this is all of this goes on within the boundaries of this SVI. And that's kind of typical of our activated sludge plants. That's typical of what I've seen, and it's typical of most facilities.
So that's the state point. If you'd like a copy of this Excel spreadsheet, send me an email at WastewaterOperationsChannel@gmail.com. As always, like and subscribe down below, guys. Thanks.